The Kansas City afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Troost Avenue as Travis Kelce guided his black Lamborghini through the heavy traffic. Fresh off another grueling practice session with the Chiefs, his muscles ached from the two-a-day workouts Coach Reed had been putting them through. The radio buzzed with talk about their upcoming playoff push, but Travis barely heard it over the hum of his air conditioning. As he approached the intersection near 31st Street, the traffic light flashed from yellow to red. Travis eased on the brakes, the luxury car purring to a stop behind a beaten-up Honda Civic. That's when he saw him, a small figure weaved between the stopped cars, carrying what looked like a cooler. The kid couldn't have been more than 12 years old, wearing a faded Kansas City Chiefs jersey that hung loose on his thin frame. His dark skin glistened with sweat as he approached each vehicle with a practiced smile. "Ice cold water! Ice cold water! $1!" the boy called out in a voice that carried surprising confidence for someone so young. Travis watched through his tinted windows. Driver after driver waved the kid away or simply ignored him. The boy's smile never faltered, but Travis could see something in his eyes, a determination that seemed too mature for his age. The kid approached the Honda in front of him. The driver rolled down his window just long enough to shake his head before rolling it back up. The boy nodded politely and moved toward Travis's Lamborghini. For a moment, Travis hesitated. He usually kept his windows up in traffic to avoid being recognized, but something about this kid struck him differently. Maybe it was the Chiefs jersey, or maybe it was the way the boy carried himself with quiet dignity despite being repeatedly rejected. Travis pressed the button to lower his window. "Ice cold water, sir?" the boy asked, his eyes widening slightly as he recognized the face behind the wheel. "Oh, wow, you're Travis Kelce." "Yeah, that's me." Travis smiled, noting how the kid's professional demeanor never wavered even after recognizing. "How much for the water?" "Just $1, Mr. Kelce. They're really cold, I promise." Travis reached for his wallet, but found himself curious about this young entrepreneur. "What's your name, little man?" "DeAndre, sir. DeAndre William." "Nice to meet you, DeAndre. How long you been out here selling water?" The boy shifted the cooler to his other arm, showing no signs of embarrassment about his situation. "About 6 months now, sir. Every day after school and on weekends." 6 months? That's some serious dedication. Travis pulled out a $20 bill. "Tell you what, give me 2 waters and keep the change." DeAndre's eyes went wide. "Mr. Kelce, that's too much. I can't take all that." "Sure you can. Consider it a tip for good customer service." Travis accepted the 2 ice-cold bottles. "So where are your parents? They know you're out here working this hard?" The question hung in the air for a moment. DeAndre's practiced smile flickered, and for the first time, Travis saw the boy's age show through his mature facade. They're in prison, sir." The words hit Travis like a blindside tackle. He'd been expecting to hear about parents working multiple jobs, maybe being at home. Prison was the last thing he anticipated. Prison? Travis found himself leaning forward. "How long?" 8 months now." DeAndre's voice grew quiet. "They got arrested for selling drugs, but..." He stopped himself, glancing around nervously. "But what?" The light turned green, and cars behind Travis began honking their horn. He waved them around while keeping his attention focused on DeAndre. "I probably shouldn't say nothing more about it," DeAndre said, stepping back from the car. "Thank you for the money, Mr. Kelce. I hope y'all win the Super Bowl this year." "Wait!" Travis called out, but more cars were honking now, and DeAndre was already moving toward the next vehicle. As Travis pulled away from the intersection, he couldn't shake the image of the boy's face when he'd mentioned his parents. There had been something in DeAndre's eye, not shame or anger, confusion, like he didn't understand why his parents were locked up. Travis drove the rest of the way home in silence, the radio chatter about football seeming trivial compared to what he'd just heard. At every red light, he found himself looking for other kids selling water, wondering how many more stories like DeAndre's were out there. By the time he pulled into his driveway in his upscale Leawood neighborhood, Travis had made a decision. He wasn't going to be able to get that kid out of his head until he knew more about what had happened to his parents. Inside his sprawling house, Travis set the water bottles on his granite kitchen counter and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for Jasmine Washington, a criminal defense attorney he'd met at a charity event last year. "Jasmine, it's Travis Kelce." "Yeah, I know it's been a while. Listen, I need to ask you about something, and I'm not even sure where to start. He told her about his encounter with DeAndre, describing the boy's hesitation when talking about his parents' case. Travis, Jasmine said after he finished, what you're describing sounds like it could be a lot of things. Drug cases in this city. Well, let's just say they don't always go the way they should. You said the kid seemed confused about why his parents were locked up? Yeah, like he genuinely didn't understand it. That's either a kid in denial or a kid who knows something doesn't add up. If you're serious about looking into this, I'd need names, case numbers, that kind of thing. Travis looked at the water bottles again, remembering DeAndre's mature demeanor, the way he'd carried himself, despite his circumstance. I'm serious. That kid shouldn't have to be out there selling water to survive while his parents are locked up for something that might not even be true. All right then. But Travis, you need to understand what you might be getting into. If there really is something wrong with this case, it could involve corrupt cops, lying witnesses, maybe even judges. People don't like it when celebrities start poking around in the justice system. I don't care about that. I know you don't. That's what worries me. After hanging up, Travis stood in his kitchen looking out at his perfectly manicured backyard. Tomorrow he had practice, then team meeting, then probably some media obligation. But somewhere across town, a 12-year-old boy was getting ready to wake up and sell water on street corners to pay for basic necessities. The contrast couldn't have been starker, and Travis Kelce was about to learn that sometimes the biggest plays happen off the field. The next morning, Travis found himself driving a different route to practice. Instead of taking his usual path down Ward Parkway, he detoured through the area where he'd met DeAndre. Sure enough, at 7:30 a.m., there was the boy at the same intersection, this time with what looked like breakfast burritos instead of water. Travis pulled into a nearby gas station and watched. DeAndre worked the morning rush hour traffic with the same professional manner he'd shown the day before. Even from a distance, Travis could see the kid's routine: approach each car with confidence, accept rejection gracefully, move on to the next opportunity. After practice, Travis called Jasmine Washington again. I've got a paralegal doing some digging, she told him. The parents are Roberto and Maria Williams. They were arrested in a joint DEA Kansas City PD operation 8 months ago, charged with distribution of controlled substance, specifically cocaine and fentanyl. What kind of evidence did they have? That's where it gets interesting. The charges were based primarily on confidential informant testimony and a search that turned up drugs and cash in their apartment. But here's the thing. Roberto Williams worked as a mechanic at a shop on Troost, and Maria worked part-time at a grocery store. Neither had any prior drug arrest. Travis felt his jaw tighten. So they went from no criminal history to major drug dealers overnight? It happens, but not usually. Most people work their way up in the drug trade. Going straight to distribution-level charges is unusual for first-time offenders. What about their lawyer, public defender? Overworked, underpaid, and, according to court records, he met with them exactly twice before advising them to take a plea deal. They took a plea. No, actually, they insisted on their innocence and went to trial. Both got 8 years. They're currently at Lansing Correctional Facility, about an hour west of the city. Travis was quiet for a moment, processing the information. Jasmine, this doesn't sound right. No, it doesn't. But Travis, you need to understand something. The justice system in this country convicts a lot of innocent people, especially poor people of color. If we investigated every case that seemed fishy, we'd never get to the end of them. But this isn't every case. This is DeAndre's parents. And why is DeAndre special? Because you happened to meet him at a red light? The question stung because Travis knew Jasmine was right. There were probably hundreds of kids like DeAndre in Kansas City alone, all dealing with the aftermath of parents caught up in the justice system. But knowing that didn't make him care any less about this particular case. Maybe he's not special, Travis said finally, but he's the one I met. If his parents are innocent, then someone needs to do something about it. All right, if you're determined to go down this road, I can file a motion for discovery. Get us access to the case files, police report, witness statement, but it'll cost you. Money's not an issue. I'm not talking about money, Travis. I'm talking about your reputation, your career. You start accusing the DEA and Kansas City PD of railroading innocent people, they're going to push back hard. Travis thought about DeAndre's face, the confusion in his eyes when he'd mentioned his parents. Do it. 3 days later, Travis was in Jasmine's downtown office reviewing the case file. What he read made his stomach turn. Look at this, Jasmine pointed to a police report. The confidential informant claims he bought drugs from Roberto Williams at least 6 times over a 3-month period. But the surveillance logs show Roberto was at work during 4 of those alleged transactions. How is that possible? Either the informant is lying, or the police reports are falsified. There's more. She flipped to another page. The search warrant was based on this informant's testimony, but look at the date it was issued versus when it was executed. Travis scanned the document. They executed the warrant 2 days before it was issued? Exactly. Which means either someone backdated the warrant, or they searched the apartment illegally and then got a warrant to cover their track. This is insane. How did their lawyer not catch this? Because he spent exactly 47 minutes total with his clients before trial. According to his billing record, he was handling 93 other cases at the same time. Travis leaned back in his chair, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of what they were uncovering. So what do we do now? Now we dig deeper. I want to know who this confidential informant is, and I want to know why Roberto and Maria Williams were targeted in the first place. Targeted? You think this was personal? In my experience, when the evidence is this sloppy, it usually means someone wanted these specific people arrested, and they didn't much care whether the case would hold up to scrutiny. Travis's phone buzzed with a text from his teammate Patrick Mahomes asking about their plans for the weekend. Looking at it felt surreal. Here he was, uncovering what appeared to be a massive injustice, while his normal life continued, as if nothing had changed. Jasmine, I want to visit them. Roberto and Maria Williams, I want to hear their side of the story. Travis, that's not a good idea. If word gets out that you're visiting convicted drug dealers in prison, they're not drug dealers. You just proved that. I proved the case against them was flawed. That's not the same thing as proving they're innocent. And even if they are innocent, the optics of you visiting them could be disastrous. Travis stood up and walked to the window overlooking downtown Kansas City. From Jasmine's office, he could see the courthouse where Roberto and Maria Williams had been convicted, and beyond that, the neighborhoods where families like theirs struggled to survive. You know what's disastrous? He said finally. A 12-year-old kid selling water on street corners because his innocent parents are rotting in prison. That's disaster. Jasmine was quiet for a moment. All right, I'll set up the visit, but we go together and we go quiet. The last thing we need is media attention until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Agreed. As Travis left the office that afternoon, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at the edge of something much bigger than a wrongful conviction. The pieces didn't just point to sloppy police work or an overworked public defender. They pointed to something deliberate, something coordinated. And if that was true, then DeAndre's parents weren't just victims of the system failing. They were victims of the system working exactly as someone intended it to. The question was, who wanted Roberto and Maria Williams in prison badly enough to fabricate evidence against them? And more importantly, what were they going to do when they found out Travis Kelce was asking questions? Lansing Correctional Facility, squatted on the Kansas prairie like a concrete tumor, surrounded by razor wire and guard tower that glinted in the morning sun. Travis had been inside exactly one prison before, a charity visit to a minimum security facility where he'd signed autographs and talked to inmates about making better choices. This was different. This was maximum security, and the weight of it hit him as soon as he walked through the metal detectors. First time in a place like this? Jasmine asked, as they waited in the sterile visiting room. Is it that obvious? You look like you're about to throw up. Travis managed a weak smile. The room was filled with small tables, each surrounded by plastic chairs that had seen better decades. Other visitors, mostly women and children, sat across from inmates in orange jumpsuits, having conversations that looked both intimate and strained. There they are. Jasmine nodded toward the door where inmates were filing in. Roberto Williams was smaller than Travis had expected, maybe 5'7" with calloused hands that spoke of years of manual labor. Maria Williams walked beside him, a woman whose eyes held a strength that 8 months in prison hadn't diminished. When they saw Travis, both stopped in their track. Mr. Kelce? Roberto's voice carried disbelief. What are you doing here? I met your son, Travis said as they sat down. DeAndre. He's selling water at the Troost and 31st intersection. Maria's composure cracked for the first time. Our baby is selling water on the street? Ma'am, he's trying to take care of his grandma. He told me you two were in here, and something about his story didn't sit right with me. Roberto leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Mr. Kelce, we never sold drugs, not once in our lives. We don't even know what cocaine looks like except from TV. Tell me what happened, Jasmine said, pulling out a legal pad. Maria took a shaky breath. It was a Tuesday night. We were watching TV, and DeAndre was doing homework at the kitchen table. Around 9 o'clock, there was this pounding on the door. Before we could even get up, they were inside. How many officers? Jasmine asked. Maybe 8 or 10, Roberto said. DEA, Kansas City Police, some others. They had a warrant, said we were dealing drugs out of our apartment. Where exactly did they say they found the drugs? In our bedroom closet, Maria replied. But Mr. Kelce, I organize that closet every Sunday. I know every single thing in there. There were no drugs. Travis felt a chill run down his spine. What about the money they found? Roberto's jaw clenched. $2,000. Our savings. We were trying to buy a used car because mine was breaking down, and I needed reliable transportation to get to work. You kept $2,000 in cash in your closet? Jasmine's tone was neutral, but Travis could hear the question mark. Ms. Washington, Maria said, we didn't have a bank account. Roberto's credit was bad from some medical bills when DeAndre was born, and we couldn't qualify for a checking account. We cashed our paychecks at the grocery store where I work. It was a detail that rang true in a way that fabricated stories rarely did. Travis knew plenty of people, even some with good income, who lived outside the traditional banking system for various reasons. What about this confidential informant who claimed to buy drugs from you? Jasmine continued. Roberto and Maria exchanged glances. That's the part that makes no sense, Roberto said. The prosecutor said this person bought drugs from me 6 different times over 3 months, but I work 10-hour shifts at Bailey's Auto Repair. I'm there from 7 in the morning until 6 at night, Monday through Friday. On weekends, I take DeAndre to the park, or we watch football. We can verify your work schedule. Jasmine made an already did, Maria said. My public defender never even looked at it. He told us we should take a plea deal for 5 years, because if we went to trial, we'd get 10. Instead, you got 8, Travis observed. Because we're not guilty, Roberto said firmly. I wasn't going to admit to something I didn't do, even if it meant more time. A guard walked by, and the conversation paused. Travis looked around the room at other families having similar conversations and wondered how many of them involved innocent people. Mr. Kelce, Maria said quietly, why are you really here? You don't know us. It was a fair question, and one Travis had been asking himself. Because your son shouldn't have to sell water on street corners to survive, and because if you're innocent, then someone needs to fix this. We can't pay you, Roberto said to Jasmine. Whatever this costs, we don't have it. This one's pro bono, she replied, glancing at Travis. Mr. Kelce, Maria's voice was barely audible now. Is DeAndre okay? Is he eating enough? Is he safe? The question broke Travis's heart. Here was a mother in prison for a crime she likely didn't commit, and her biggest concern was whether her child was safe. He's tough, Travis said. Tougher than any 12-year-old should have to be, but he's surviving. We need to get you both out of here, Jasmine said. I'm going to file for a new trial based on ineffective assistance of counsel and prosecutorial misconduct. But I need you to think, is there anyone who might have wanted to see you in prison? Anyone you had problems with? Roberto and Maria looked at each other again, and Travis saw something pass between them. There was this guy, Roberto said slowly, called himself Tank. He came by the apartment a few times, maybe 4 months before we got arrested. What did he want? He said he knew we had a nice setup in our building, good location, quiet neighbors. He wanted to use our place for business meeting, offered us $500 a week just to let him come by sometime. And you said no? Of course we said no, Maria replied. We knew what kind of business he was talking about. We told him to get out and not come back. Did he threaten you? Not exactly, Roberto said. But when he left, he said something like, y'all are making a big mistake. This neighborhood ain't safe for people who don't know how to be neighborly. Jasmine was writing furious. Can you describe this Tank guy? Big dude, maybe 6'4", 300 pounds, had a gold tooth and a scar on his neck. Drove a red Escalade with custom rims. Travis felt the pieces clicking into place. You think this Tank guy set you up when you wouldn't cooperate? I think, Maria said, that when you tell a drug dealer no in this city, sometimes they find ways to make you disappear. A buzzer sounded, indicating visiting time was almost over. We're going to get you out of here, Travis said, standing up. I don't know how long it'll take, but we're going to fix this. Roberto reached across the table and grabbed Travis's hand. Mr. Kelce, "You don't understand what this means. We've been forgotten in here. Nobody cares about people like us. I care, and I'm not forgetting." As they walked back to the parking lot, Jasmine was already on her phone with her investigator. "I need you to find everything you can on a drug dealer called Tank. Big guy, gold tooth, drives a red Escalade. Start with arrest records in the last 2 years." Travis got in his car, but didn't start the engine immediately. Through the windshield, he could see the prison walls where Roberto and Maria Williams would sleep tonight, just like they had for the past 8 months. Meanwhile, Tank, whoever he was probably still out there dealing drugs and destroying families. But not for much longer if Travis had anything to say about it. The video was grainy, but clear enough. Travis sat in Jasmine's office watching surveillance footage from Bailey's auto repair, and what he saw made his blood boil. There was Roberto Williams working under the hood of a Ford pickup truck at exactly 2:30 p.m. on March 15th, the same time and date when the confidential informant claimed to be buying cocaine for him across town. "This is just one of 6 alleged transactions," Jasmine said, fast-forwarding through the footage. "We've got Roberto on camera at work during 4 of them. What about the other 2? Those were supposedly on weekends. I've got a private investigator tracking down witnesses who can place Roberto and Maria at home or with DeAndre during those times." Travis's phone buzzed with a text from his teammate Chris Jones. "Bro, where you been? Coach is asking questions about your focus lately." It was true. Travis had been distracted during practice, showing up late to team meeting, and generally being less than the professional his teammates expected. But every time he tried to focus on football, he thought about DeAndre selling water in the heat, or Roberto and Maria sitting in prison cells for a crime they didn't commit. "We found Tank," Jasmine announced, pulling Travis back to the present. "Who is he?" "Real name is Demetrius Jefferson. He's been arrested 14 times in the last 5 years on various drug charges, but he keeps getting released on technicalities or reduced sentence. Word on the street is he's a confidential informant for the DEA." Travis felt his stomach drop. "You're saying the guy who wanted to use Roberto and Maria's apartment for drug deals is working with the DEA? I'm saying it's a very interesting coincidence. And here's another interesting coincidence. Guess who the confidential informant was in the Williams case? Tank? We can't prove it because informant identities are sealed, but the physical description in the court file matches Tank perfectly. 6'4", approximately 300 pounds, distinctive scarring on the neck area." Travis stood up and started pacing. "So, let me get this straight. Tank approaches Roberto and Maria about using their apartment for drug deals. They say no. A few months later, Tank, now working as a confidential informant, accuses them of dealing drugs. The DEA raids their place, plants evidence, and they get sent to prison for 8 years. That's the theory, but proving it is another matter entirely. What do we need to prove it?" Jasmine opened another file. "We need Tank to confess, or we need someone who was involved in planting the evidence to come forward, or we need to find holes in the case so big that even a judge can't ignore them." "What kind of holes?" "Well, here's something interesting. The warrant to search the Williams apartment was signed by Judge Patricia Morris, but Judge Morrison was in Houston that day, attending her daughter's wedding. I've got photos from the wedding, airline receipts, the whole thing." Travis felt a surge of hope. So the warrant was forged? Either forged or someone else signed it using her name. Either way, it makes the entire search illegal. That should be enough to get them out, right? Jasmine's expression was cautious. "It should be, but the justice system doesn't like admitting it made mistakes, especially big ones. We're talking about not just overturning a conviction, but potentially exposing corruption in the DEA and the Kansas City Police Department." Travis's phone rang. It was his agent. "Travis, where the hell are you? You missed the Sports Illustrated photo shoot, and Nike is asking questions about your availability for the commercial shoot next week." "I'll call you back," Travis said, hanging up. "Everything okay?" Jasmine asked. "Just my normal life trying to intrude on what's actually important." "Travis, you need to be careful. You're a public figure, and if this story breaks before we're ready..." "What story? That I'm trying to help innocent people?" "The story that you're accusing federal law enforcement of corruption based on the word of convicted drug dealer." It was a sobering reminder of how the situation could be spun. Travis realized that everything he'd accomplished in his career could be at risk if this went sideways. His phone buzzed again. This time, It was a text from an unknown number. Stay out of business that ain't yours. Some people don't like celebrities asking questions. Travis showed the message to Jasmine, who immediately called her investigator. We need security, she said. Someone knows Travis is involved in this case. An hour later, Travis was back on Troost Avenue, this time with a bodyguard following discreetly behind in a separate car. He found DeAndre at the same intersection, but the boy looked different, thinner, more tired. Hey, Mr. Kelce. DeAndre's face lit up when he saw the Lamborghini. You came back? Course I came back. How you doing, little man? I'm good. Grandma's been feeling better since you bought all that water last week. We was able to get her some of her medicine. Travis's heart sank. He'd given the kid $20, and they'd used it for medication. DeAndre, I need to ask you something important. Has anybody been asking questions about me? About our conversation? The boy's expression changed, becoming more guarded. What kind of questions? Any kind. Anyone want to know what we talked about? Or if I've been back to see you? DeAndre glanced around nervous. There was this big dude, yet. He said he knew my parents, and he wanted to know if any reporters or famous people had been talking to. What did you tell him? I didn't tell him nothing. But Mr. Kelce, he scared me. He said things could get bad for my grandma if I started talking to the wrong people. Travis felt anger rising in his chest. DeAndre, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You and your grandma are going to be safe, okay? I'm going to make sure of that. How? It was a fair question from a kid who'd learned not to trust promises from adults. Because I've got friends who are going to help, and because your parents are innocent, and innocent people don't stay in prison forever. You really think they're innocent? I know they are. We found proof. For the first time since Travis had met him, DeAndre looked like a 12-year-old kid instead of a miniature adult. His eyes filled with tears he'd probably been holding back for months. I knew it, he whispered. I knew they didn't do what they said they did. My parents ain't never even smoked a cigarette. Travis reached into his wallet and pulled out $500 in cash. DeAndre, this is for you and your grandma, but I don't want you selling water on the street anymore. It's not safe. Mr. Kelce, I can't take that much money. Yes, you can. And tomorrow, someone's going to come to your apartment to make sure you and your grandma have everything you need. Her name is Jasmine, and she's a lawyer who's working to get your parents out of prison. As Travis drove away, he called Jasmine on his Bluetooth. We need to move fast, he said. They're threatening the kid now. I'm filing the motion for a new trial tomorrow morning. But Travis, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this is going to get messy before it gets better. How messy? The kind of messy that ends careers and ruins reputations. Are you sure you want to keep going? Travis thought about DeAndre's face when he'd realized his parents might actually come home. I'm sure. Then buckle up, because we're about to find out just how far some people will go to keep the truth buried. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, and it broke big. Travis was eating breakfast when his phone started buzzing with calls from reporters, his agent, and teammates. The headline on ESPN read, Chiefs star Travis Kelce accuses DEA of corruption in drug case. Damn it, Travis muttered, grabbing his phone to call Jasmine. I'm already dealing with, she said before he could speak. Someone leaked our court filing to the media before the judge even saw it. Who would do that? Someone who wants to control the narrative before we can present our evidence properly. Travis turned on the TV to find himself on every news channel. CNN was running a segment titled Celebrity Justice When Athletes Play Detective. Fox News had him on a split screen with Tank's mugshot under the headline, NFL Star Defends Drug Dealer. His phone rang. It was his mother. Travis Donald Kelce, she said, using his full name the way she had when he was in trouble as a kid. What in the world are you doing on TV talking about drug dealers? Mom, it's not what it looks like. These people are innocent. Baby, I raised you to help people, but I also raised you to be smart. You're putting everything you've worked for at risk. Before Travis could respond, his doorbell rang. Through the window, he could see a crowd of reporters gathered on his front lawn. I've got to go, Mom. I'll call you later. Travis spent the morning trapped in his own house, watching his reputation get dissected on national television. Former players, legal experts, and talking heads all weighed in on whether he was a crusading hero or a naive celebrity who'd been manipulated by convicted criminals. Around noon, Jasmine called with an update. The judge wants to see us this afternoon. Emergency hearing. But Travis, there's something else. Tank is dead. Travis felt the world tilt. What? Apparent drug overdose, found in his apartment early this morning. Very convenient timing. You think someone killed him? I think Tank was the only person who could directly implicate the people who really set up Roberto and Maria Williams. And now he's gone. The emergency hearing was a circus. The courthouse was surrounded by media trucks, and Travis needed a police escort just to get inside. Judge Patricia Morris, the same judge whose signature had allegedly been forged on the search warrant, presided over the hearing. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, this motion is a publicity stunt by a celebrity who has no understanding of the criminal justice system. The defendants were convicted by a jury based on solid evidence. Solid evidence? Jasmine stood up. Your Honor, we have proof that the confidential informant was a known drug dealer who had threatened the defendants months before their arrest. We have surveillance footage showing Roberto Williams was at work during 4 of the 6 alleged drug transactions. And most importantly, we have evidence that the search warrant was signed with your forged signature while you were attending your daughter's wedding in Houston. A murmur went through the packed courtroom. Judge Morrison's face was stone, but Travis could see something flickering in her eyes. You're accusing this court of signing a forged warrant? We're presenting evidence that someone forged your signature, Your Honor. We have airline receipts, hotel records, and wedding photos proving you were in Texas when this warrant was allegedly signed. The prosecutor was shuffling through papers, frantic. Your Honor, even if there were irregularities in the warrant process, the defendants were still convicted by a jury based on the evidence from an illegal search, Jasmine interrupted. Evidence that should never have been admitted. Judge Morrison called for a recess. During the break, Travis found himself surrounded by reporters in the courthouse hallway. Mr. Kelce, why are you risking your career for people you barely know? Because someone has to, Travis replied. A 12-year-old kid is selling water on street corners because his innocent parents are in prison. If that doesn't make you want to do something, I don't know what will. But critics say you're being manipulated by convicted drug dealers. Critics haven't seen the evidence we've seen. When federal agents forge signatures and plant evidence, that's not justice, that's corruption. When court reconvened, Judge Morrison's demeanor had changed. I've spent the recess reviewing the evidence presented by the defense, Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the courtroom. What I've found is deeply troubling. She held up a document. This is indeed my alleged signature on the search warrant dated March 10th. However, as the defense has proven, I was in Houston attending my daughter's wedding that entire week. I have never seen this warrant before today, and I certainly did not sign it. The prosecutor's face went pale. Your Honor, perhaps there was an administrative error. An administrative error? Judge Morrison's voice rose. Someone forged a federal judge's signature to authorize an illegal search. That's not an error, counselor. That's a felony. Travis felt his heart pounding as the judge continued. Furthermore, the surveillance evidence clearly shows that Roberto Williams was at his place of employment during the times when he was allegedly selling drugs. The confidential informant testimony appears to be fabricated. She turned to the prosecutor. I'm ordering an immediate investigation into this matter by the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, and I'm granting the defense motion for a new trial. The courtroom erupted. Travis heard cheering from the back where some community supporters had gathered, while reporters frantically typed on their phone. Your Honor, Jasmine stood up. Given the evidence of prosecutorial misconduct and the illegal search, we request that Roberto and Maria Williams be released immediately pending the new trial. Judge Morrison nodded. Motion granted. The defendants will be released today, with all charges dropped, pending the outcome of the corruption investigation. As Travis walked out of the courthouse, the media frenzy was unlike anything he'd experienced. But for the first time in weeks, he was smiling. Mr. Kelce, a reporter called out, how does it feel to know you've potentially exposed federal corruption? It feels like justice, Travis replied. But this isn't about me. This is about a family that was torn apart by people who abused their power. 3 hours later, Travis was back at the Troost Avenue intersection. This time, he wasn't alone. DeAndre was there, but so were Roberto and Maria Williams, still wearing the clothes they'd put on in prison that morning. The reunion was everything Travis had hoped it would be. DeAndre ran into his parents' arms like the 12-year-old he'd never had the chance to be for the past 8 months. Maria held her son and sobbed, while Roberto wrapped his arms around both of them. Mr. Kelce, Roberto said when he finally looked up, how do we ever thank you for this? You don't need to thank me. You just need to be a family again. But Travis wasn't naive. He knew the victory was only partial. Tank was dead, taking whatever secrets he had to the grave. The corruption investigation would take months, maybe years, and there were probably other families out there dealing with the same injustice. As the Williams family walked away together for the first time in 8 months, DeAndre turned back and waved at Travis. "See you around, Mr. Kelce. See you around, little man." Travis got back in his Lamborghini and drove toward the Chiefs' training facility. He had practice in an hour, and his coach had some pointed questions about his recent media attention. His agent was fielding calls from Nike about whether his activism would affect their partnership. ESPN wanted an exclusive interview. But for the first time in months, Travis felt like he could focus on football again. Not because the Williams case was completely resolved, but because he'd learned something important about himself. Success on the field was one thing, but using his platform to fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves? That was something bigger than any touchdown catch or Super Bowl ring. His phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. 3 more families have reached out about similar cases. "You interested?" Travis smiled as he typed back, "Send me the details." The light turned red at Troost and 31st, the same intersection where this had all started. But this time, no 12-year-old boy approached his car selling water. Instead, Travis could see in the distance a family of 3 walking home together, finally whole again. Sometimes the biggest plays happen off the field, and sometimes the most important victories have nothing to do with winning game. As Travis drove away, he couldn't help but think that this was just the beginning. In a justice system that often failed the poorest and most vulnerable, celebrity voices like his could make a difference. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't always be popular. But for families like the Williams, it would always be worth it. The radio buzzed with talk about the Chiefs' upcoming playoff push, but Travis barely heard it. He was already thinking about the next case, the next family that needed someone to believe in their innocence. After all, there were a lot more red lights in Kansas City, and probably a lot more stories that needed telling.